The evening sky was turning orange and the streets of the small town were becoming quiet. Most people had gone inside their homes after a long day, but not everyone had a roof over their head. Two stray German shepherds wandered near the edge of the town, their paws dusty and their stomachs empty. They had no names, no collars, and no owners. They only had each other. For months, these two dogs had survived together. One was slightly bigger, with sharp eyes and a strong body, while the other was younger, leaner, and more energetic. They were partners in every sense, always moving side by side. Sometimes they found scraps of food near trash bins. Other times they hunted small animals in the fields. They knew hunger, cold nights, and the feeling of being unwanted. But even though the world had been hard on them, their loyalty to each other remained unbroken. That evening the air was calm, and the sound of crickets filled the quiet. The dogs sniffed the ground as they moved through a deserted lot. The smell of dried grass and earth surrounded them, but suddenly their ears picked up something unusual. It was faint, like a soft whimper, almost blending into the sound of the wind. Both dogs froze, their ears standing tall. They looked at each other as if asking, "Did you hear that too?" They listened again, and there it was, the sound of a child crying. The bigger shepherd growled softly, not in anger but in alertness. The younger one tilted its head, trying to understand. Without hesitation, they began moving toward the sound. Their paws pressed against the dry leaves as they pushed through the tall grass. The whimpering became clearer with each step, and soon their eyes caught sight of something that made them stop. There, under a half-broken wooden fence, sat a little girl. She looked no older than 6 or 7. Her clothes were dusty, and her face carried streaks of dried tears. But the most shocking thing was that her small hands were tied together with rough rope. She sat curled on the ground, frightened and helpless, her wide eyes staring at the darkening sky. The dogs paused. They were strays, creatures that had often been chased away by humans. But in that moment, it was not fear of people that guided them. It was something deeper, something protective. Slowly, they stepped closer. The girl noticed them and gasped, her eyes widening even more. For a second, she thought the big animals might hurt her, but instead of snarling, the older shepherd lowered itself onto the ground, moving slowly so as not to scare her. The younger one wagged its tail gently, taking small steps forward as if trying to say, "Don't be afraid. We are here." The little girl's lips trembled. She wanted to call for help, but her voice was weak. She whispered something almost too soft to hear, but the dogs seemed to understand. They came closer, circling around her. One of them sat right beside her, pressing its warm body against her leg. The other sniffed at the rope on her hands, pulling at it gently with its teeth. The girl was surprised. No one had come for her, but these two stray dogs had. The bigger shepherd lifted its head and let out a deep, loud bark. It echoed across the empty field, startling some birds from the trees. Then it barked again, louder this time, as if calling for the world to notice. The younger one joined in, its sharp voice filling the air. They barked again and again, refusing to stop. At first, no one paid attention. People who lived nearby were used to hearing stray dogs bark. Some thought it was just animals fighting or chasing something. But the barking didn't stop. It grew louder, stronger, and more desperate. It was as if the dogs were not just making noise, they were shouting for help. The little girl, still tied, felt something she hadn't felt all day. Hope. She looked at the dogs with wide eyes, realizing they weren't going to leave her. Their barks were not random. They were trying to save her. The sky grew darker and the field looked even lonelier, but the two shepherds stayed right there. The older one paced back and forth, barking, while the younger one kept nudging the ropes, trying to free the girl with its teeth. Every now and then the dogs would stop and look at her, making sure she was still okay. Their eyes, instead of being wild and hungry, were filled with concern. Minutes passed, and finally a door creaked open from a house nearby. An old man stepped out, annoyed at the noise. He muttered to himself about stray dogs disturbing the evening. He picked up a stick, planning to chase them away. But as he walked closer, the scene in front of him made him freeze. He saw the two dogs standing protectively around a little girl who was tied up and crying softly. The man's stick fell from his hand. His heart pounded. He had thought it was nothing more than noisy animals, but what he saw left him in shock. The two German shepherds stood tall, their ears high, their bodies tense but calm. They were not letting anyone near the girl unless they knew he was safe. For a moment, the man wondered if they were guarding her like their own pup. He slowly stepped back, realizing this was no ordinary situation. Inside the girl's heart, fear slowly turned into trust. She reached out her tied hands toward the dogs. The younger one pressed its nose against her wrists, licking them softly as if to comfort her. The bigger shepherd barked again, urging more people to come. The man rushed back to his house, shouting for his neighbors. Soon more people stepped out, curious about the commotion. One by one, they saw the same thing: the two stray German shepherds guarding a helpless little girl. Gasps of shock and murmurs filled the air. No one had expected this. The little girl's tears flowed again, but this time they were mixed with relief. She was no longer alone. Two forgotten strays who had spent their lives being ignored had chosen to protect her when no one else was around, and so the story began, not with police, not with adults, but with two homeless dogs who listened to a cry that everyone else had missed. The crowd of neighbors had started to gather, whispering in shock at what they were seeing. Two stray German shepherds, who most people usually avoided, were standing guard around a little girl tied up in ropes. The girl's cheeks were wet with tears, her lips trembling, but she kept her small hands close to the dogs as if she already trusted them more than the adults standing a few feet away. For a moment, no one moved closer. Some were afraid of the dogs. Others didn't know how to react to the shocking sight before them. The bigger shepherd stood tall, its eyes sharp, and barked again. It wasn't the bark of an angry animal, but the bark of a creature demanding attention, demanding action. The younger one wagged its tail nervously, still pressing its nose against the girl's hands, trying again and again to chew the rope. The old man who had first discovered the scene finally spoke. His voice was unsteady. "This girl, she's tied up. Somebody needs to help her." But even as he said those words, he hesitated to step closer, afraid the dogs might bite. The little girl shook her head weakly and whispered, "They won't hurt you. They're helping me." Her voice was faint, but it carried enough weight to silence the doubts around her. One woman gasped, placing a hand on her mouth. "Oh, dear Lord, these dogs. They found her." Another man muttered, "I've seen these strays around town, always together. Who would have thought they'd do something like this?" Still, no one dared to step forward. The older shepherd seemed to sense the hesitation. It growled softly, not at the people, but as if to warn them not to do anything reckless. Its body language showed clear protectiveness. It was saying, "She's ours to protect until you prove you're safe." The girl's small body shivered in the cool evening air. She tried to shift her position, but the rope cut into her skin. The younger shepherd whimpered, licking her wrist as if to comfort her. Then, with determination, it bit down harder on the rope. The fibers stretched and loosened slightly, though not enough to set her free. The neighbors watched in awe. One of them, a middle-aged woman named Clara, finally stepped forward. She was known for her kindness toward animals, and often left bowls of water outside her gate for strays. She crouched down a little distance away, speaking gently. "It's okay. We just want to help her." The older shepherd looked at her, its sharp eyes watching every movement. Clara kept her hands visible and her tone soft. "Good dogs. You're doing so well. Let us help too." The girl turned her head slightly toward Clara. Please untie me." Her words broke everyone's heart. Clara took a slow step closer, then another. The younger shepherd backed away from the rope but stayed close to the girl's side. The older one didn't move but let out a low whine, almost like it was giving permission. Carefully, Clara reached for the rope. Her hands trembled, but she pulled at the knot, trying to loosen it. The rope was rough and tightly tied, but after a few minutes of struggling, she managed to slip it off the girl's wrists. The girl gasped in relief, rubbing her sore hands. The younger shepherd barked happily, its tail wagging faster, almost like it was celebrating the small victory. The older one pressed closer to the girl, making sure she was safe. The neighbors broke into chatter. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others wiped at their eyes. No one could deny the truth. The dogs had found the girl, stayed with her, and even tried to rescue her before humans ever showed up. But the story didn't end there. Even though the girl's hands were free, she was still shaken and weak. Clara lifted her gently into her arms. The girl clung to her tightly but looked back at the dogs with wide eyes. "Don't leave them," she whispered. "They saved me." Her words touched everyone standing there. For a child who had just been through fear and pain, her first thought was to make sure her rescuers weren't left behind. The dogs, hearing her voice, followed closely as Clara began walking toward the road. They stayed right at her heels, never letting the girl out of their sight. Each step showed their loyalty, as if they had already decided that their job wasn't finished. By now, more people had gathered. The noise reached the nearby police station, and soon a patrol car pulled up. 2 officers stepped out, puzzled by the crowd. When they approached, they too were left stunned at the sight of the girl and her 2 unusual protectors. "What happened here?" one officer asked. The old man explained, pointing to the girl and the dogs. "Those strays, they wouldn't stop barking. I thought they were just causing trouble, but when I came to chase them away, I saw her tied up." "These dogs, they're the reason we found her." The officers exchanged glances. One of them crouched to speak softly to the girl. "Sweetheart, what's your name?" She whispered her name, her voice trembling, but then she added quickly, "Don't let them go. They're my friends." She pointed at the German shepherds who stood close by, eyes fixed on the officers as if measuring their every move. The officers realized quickly that the dogs were not a threat. They were protectors. They nodded slowly, speaking into their radios to call for medical support. In the meantime, they allowed the dogs to stay right by the girl. The scene looked almost unreal to the people standing around. 2 stray animals, creatures many had dismissed as useless or dangerous, were now the heroes of the moment. Their loyalty and courage were plain for all to see. The younger shepherd sat down at the girl's feet, resting its head on her leg, as if saying, "We're not leaving you." The older one stood watch, scanning the crowd and the road, ready to guard against anything that might come close. Clara, still holding the girl, whispered to the crowd, "You see, sometimes those we ignore are the ones who save us." Her words carried deep meaning, making several neighbors bow their heads in silence. As the ambulance arrived, the girl was gently placed inside, but the dogs tried to climb in too. The paramedics hesitated, but the girl cried out, "Please, don't take me without them." Tears ran down her cheeks again, this time not from fear but from the thought of losing her 2 protectors. The officers decided to let the dogs follow the ambulance in their patrol car. The sight of the 2 German shepherds running behind the vehicle, tails wagging, made everyone's heart swell. It was clear they wouldn't stop until they knew the girl was safe. The whole town buzzed with the news that night. People couldn't stop talking about the bravery of 2 strays who had acted more human than many humans ever could. They had not only found the girl but also refused to leave her side until help came. And so, the bond between a lost child and 2 forgotten dogs grew stronger, setting the stage for what would happen next. The flashing red and blue lights from the police car painted the quiet neighborhood in colors of urgency. People stood by the roadside, some still whispering about what they had witnessed. But the main focus was the little girl now resting in the ambulance, her small hands bandaged where the rope had rubbed her skin raw. The paramedics worked gently, offering her water and checking her breathing. She was exhausted, but she kept turning her head toward the open doors of the ambulance, her eyes searching for the 2 dogs. The German shepherd stood just outside, refusing to move. The younger one paced nervously, letting out short whines as if afraid the ambulance might take the girl away forever. The older one sat firm and steady, its golden brown eyes locked on the child. They didn't understand sirens or flashing lights, but they understood loyalty. Wherever she went, they would go. One of the officers noticed this and shook his head in wonder. "I've seen trained police dogs act like this," he muttered. "But these 2, they're just strays." The paramedics tried to close the ambulance doors, but the girl reached out with weak arms, crying, "Wait, don't leave them. They saved me." Her voice carried desperation, and her tiny hand pointed straight at the dogs. The crowd murmured, touched by her words. The officer who had been speaking stepped forward. "Let them ride with us," he said to the paramedics. "They're not ordinary strays. They're part of this rescue." The paramedics exchanged glances and finally nodded. The older shepherd leapt gracefully into the back of the ambulance, sitting right at the girl's feet. The younger one followed quickly, wagging its tail and licking her hand as if to say, "We're still here." The girl's face softened with relief, and she leaned back against the stretcher, finally closing her eyes, comforted by the steady presence of her guardians. The ambulance pulled away, siren wailing through the night. Behind it, the police car followed closely. Inside the vehicle, the officer who had made the decision smiled faintly to himself. "These dogs may have saved her life," he whispered. The least we can do is let them stay with her. At the hospital, doctors and nurses rushed to examine the girl. She was placed gently on a bed, and while medical staff worked around her, the dog sat just outside the room. At first, the hospital staff was nervous, unsure if stray animals should be allowed inside. But when they saw how calm the girl became whenever she caught sight of them, they couldn't bring themselves to push the dogs out. Hours passed, and news of the incredible rescue spread through the town like wildfire. By morning, reporters and curious onlookers had gathered outside the hospital. Cameras flashed, voices called out, and everyone wanted to know the same thing: who was the little girl and what had really happened? But more than that, they wanted to see the two German shepherds who had shocked everyone with their courage. Inside the hospital, the girl slowly woke from her deep sleep. The first thing she saw was the younger shepherd's face pressed against the glass window of her room. Its tongue left little marks on the glass as it tried to reach her. She giggled softly, the sound fragile but genuine. The older shepherd wagged its tail slowly, standing tall as if on guard. A nurse leaned close to the girl. "Sweetheart, you're safe now. Do you want to tell us your story?" The girl nodded slowly, her eyes still fixed on the dogs. "They found me. I was so scared. I thought nobody would come, but they came. They barked and barked until someone listened." Her words were simple, but they carried the weight of truth. The officer from the night before entered the room, notebook in hand. He spoke gently, kneeling beside her bed. "You don't have to be afraid anymore. Can you tell us what happened before the dogs found you?" The girl hesitated, biting her lip. She was too young to explain everything clearly, but she shared what she could. She had been playing outside near her house when someone had left her in that empty field. She cried for hours, but no one came, until the dogs showed up. The officer nodded, understanding that more investigation would be needed. But for now, the most important thing was that she was safe. He closed his notebook and said softly, "You're very brave. And those dogs, they're heroes." The words heroes stuck in everyone's mind. Nurses began sneaking bits of food to the dogs while hospital staff filled bowls with water for them. Even though they were strays, they were treated with respect. People who once saw them as nothing but troublemakers now looked at them with admiration. Meanwhile, outside the hospital, a crowd gathered with posters, signs, and even treats for the dogs. News channels reported, "2 stray dogs save little girl," and the story spread beyond the town. Strangers from other cities called the hospital, asking about the girl and offering to adopt the dogs. But inside the hospital room, the girl had already made her choice. She looked at her parents, who had arrived that morning, their faces pale from worry and sleeplessness. When they saw their daughter alive and safe, they broke into tears, hugging her tightly. Yet even in their relief, the girl whispered to them, "Please don't let anyone take them away. They saved me. They're mine now." Her parents exchanged looks. They had never been dog owners, and the idea of taking in 2 strays seemed overwhelming. But when they looked into their daughter's pleading eyes and then at the loyal dogs waiting patiently outside the glass, they realized this was no ordinary bond. Later that day, the mayor of the town visited the hospital. He shook hands with the officers and thanked the hospital staff, but the moment he saw the dogs, his expression softened. "I've lived in this town all my life," he said, "and I've never seen anything like this. These dogs are proof that heroes can come in all shapes and sizes." The mayor announced that the town would honor the German shepherds with a special award. Children from local schools began writing letters and drawing pictures of the dogs, calling them the guardians and the angels of the night. But none of the praise or noise mattered to the dogs. They didn't understand awards or cameras. All they understood was the little girl who reached her hand out to them whenever she could. To them, she was their world and they were hers. That night, as the hospital grew quiet again, the girl whispered to her parents, "I wasn't alone. They stayed with me when no one else did. Please, can we keep them?" Her parents, holding her small hands, finally nodded. "We'll find a way," her mother said softly. The German shepherds lying just outside the room seemed to sense the decision. Their tails thumped against the floor in unison, their eyes glowing with contentment. For the first time in a long time, they were not just strays. They were protectors, family, and heroes. And while the world outside marveled at their actions, the little girl fell asleep with a smile on her face, knowing she would never be without them again. The hospital room felt warmer now, not just because of the lights, but because of the peace surrounding the little girl. She was safe, her parents were beside her, and the two German shepherds were never far away. Every time the door opened, the dogs lifted their heads alert, ready to check if their little friend was okay. Even the doctors and nurses had begun smiling at the sight, amazed at how protective the animals were. But while the girl rested, the outside world was buzzing with curiosity. Reporters had camped outside the hospital, their cameras flashing whenever the dogs were spotted. People who had once avoided the strays were now arriving with food, blankets, and even toys for them. Children pressed their faces against the hospital glass just to get a glimpse of the guardian dogs. Everyone wanted to be close to them. Inside, the police were busy too. They needed answers. Who had left the girl tied up? Why had no one noticed her missing? And how had it come to this moment where two stray animals became her only protectors? Officers questioned the neighbors, checked the field where she was found, and spoke quietly with the girl's parents. The little girl, still recovering, could only share small details. She remembered being scared, calling for help, and then seeing the two dogs come running toward her. Beyond that, her memory was blurred with fear. One officer told the parents gently, "We'll keep investigating. For now she's safe, and that's what matters most." But in his heart, he knew the story of the dogs would live longer than the mystery of what had happened. That evening, the mayor returned, this time with a few town officials. They brought a framed certificate with golden letters and a ribbon. Standing in front of the hospital crowd, the mayor lifted it high. "These two German shepherds have shown us courage, loyalty, and heart. They are true heroes of this town." The crowd clapped and cheered, their voices echoing down the street. The dogs, however, had no idea what the noise was about. The younger one wagged its tail wildly, excited by the energy around it. The older one simply sat calmly, glancing at the little girl through the hospital window. For them, the award didn't matter. All that mattered was her safety. The little girl was allowed to watch the small ceremony from her hospital bed. When she saw the mayor holding the certificate, she whispered to her mother, "But they don't need paper. They just need us." Her mother hugged her gently, touched by her words. Children have a way of understanding things that adults sometimes forget. Later, the doctors decided she was strong enough to be discharged. Her parents were ready to take her home, but there was one problem: the dogs. They had never owned pets before, and these were not just pets, but two large strays who had lived wild for years. Could they manage them? Would they even be allowed to keep them? The girl begged softly, holding her father's hand. "Please don't let them go. They'll be sad. I'll be sad too." The father sighed, looking at his wife. Both of them knew what was coming. The girl had already formed a bond that no parent could break. And honestly, after what the dogs had done, how could anyone push them away? When the girl finally left the hospital, the two shepherds followed closely behind. Reporters snapped photos of the moment, the child holding her mother's hand with the dogs walking proudly on either side. People clapped again, and someone shouted, "Guardians of the town!" Others cheered, calling them angels in fur. The family reached their car, and the dogs jumped right in as though they had belonged there all along. The girl giggled, her laughter soft but full of joy. "See," she said happily. "They know this is their home too." At home, things were different. The parents had worried that the dogs might be wild, difficult, or destructive. But the moment they entered the house, the older shepherd walked calmly to a corner, lying down with dignity, while the younger one explored carefully, sniffing everything with excitement but causing no harm. It was as if they knew they had to behave to stay close to their new family. That first night, the girl slept soundly for the first time in days. The dogs lay just outside her bedroom door, their ears twitching at every sound. If the floor creaked, they lifted their heads. If a car passed outside, they sat up for a moment before lying back down. They didn't rest fully because they believed it was their duty to guard her. Meanwhile, the town couldn't stop talking about them. Newspapers carried headlines like "Stray Dog Save Girl" and "Guardians in Fur." Television channels showed footage of them sitting outside the hospital. Strangers began calling the family, asking to adopt the dogs or to offer gifts. Some even offered money, but the family refused. These dogs were not for sale. They were part of their daughter's story now, part of her life. The police investigation continued, but answers were still slow. Yet something interesting happened. People who had once ignored strays began feeding them, showing more kindness to the homeless animals in town. It was as if the German shepherds had opened everyone's eyes. If two hungry, forgotten dogs could do something so noble, maybe others deserved a second chance too. The girls' parents began noticing small changes as well. Their daughter, who had once been shy and quiet, now walked proudly with the dogs at her side. She told her friends at school, "They're my heroes. They came for me when nobody else did." Her friends listened with wide eyes, impressed by the magical story. The dogs adjusted too. The younger shepherd loved running in the yard with the girl, chasing after sticks and barking happily. The older one often sat on the porch, its calm eyes scanning the street like a silent guard. Anyone passing by could see that this house had protectors who had already proven their loyalty. One evening, the family gathered in the living room. The father looked at his daughter, cuddled between the two shepherds, and said softly, "You were right. They don't need a certificate or an award. They just needed someone to love them. And maybe we needed them too." The mother nodded, her eyes filled with emotion. "We were blessed the day they walked into her life." The little girl hugged the dogs tightly, whispering into their fur, "I'll never let you go." And as the night grew still, the two strays, no longer forgotten, no longer unwanted, closed their eyes with peace. They had found what they had never known before, a home, a family, and a child who believed they were angels. The town had seen a miracle. The world had been reminded of loyalty and kindness in its purest form. And in one small home, a girl and her two German shepherds had begun a new chapter of life together, one filled with safety, trust, and love that nothing could break. The days that followed were unlike anything the little girl and her family had ever experienced. Their once quiet home had now become a place of warmth, laughter, and constant movement because of the two German shepherds. The girl, who had been weak and frightened after the ordeal, now woke up each morning with a smile. She no longer cried at night because she knew her protectors were close. The older shepherd always lay outside her bedroom door, keeping watch, while the younger one often curled at the foot of her bed, its head resting near her feet. Her parents noticed the change in her. She seemed brighter, stronger, and more confident than before. Whenever fear or bad memories tried to creep into her mind, the sight of those two dogs reminded her she was never alone. It was as if they had given her back the courage that had been taken from her. The town continued to celebrate the story. Neighbors who once shooed the strays away now greeted them with smiles. Some even carried treats in their pockets just in case they crossed paths with the dogs. At the grocery store, the girl's mother often overheard people saying things like, "Can you believe it? Two strays did what no person did. They protected that little girl." Others would add, "Maybe we should rethink how we see animals. They have bigger hearts than we know." One weekend, the mayor organized a small event in the town square. Families gathered. Children held handmade posters of the dogs, and a banner was stretched across the stage that read, "Thank you, Guardians." The mayor spoke about bravery and kindness, reminding everyone that heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they walk on four paws. The girl was invited on stage with her parents. Holding a microphone nervously, she spoke in her soft, innocent voice. "I was so scared and nobody came. But they came. They stayed with me. They barked until someone heard. They saved me." Her words touched every heart in the crowd. Some people wiped tears from their eyes while others clapped and cheered loudly. The two shepherds stood beside her, wagging their tails, unaware of the fame surrounding them. For them, it wasn't about glory. It was about love and loyalty. After the event, the family returned home, their hearts full of pride and gratitude. That night, the father sat on the porch watching the older shepherd sitting calmly as if it were still guarding the family. He leaned over to his wife and whispered, "Do you see this? We didn't just adopt two dogs. We adopted protectors, friends, and teachers. They're teaching us about loyalty every single day." The mother nodded, her eyes resting on the little girl inside the house, laughing as the younger shepherd chased her around. "Yes," she said softly. "They came into her life when she needed them most. Maybe that was meant to happen." But even as life settled into routine, the bond between the girl and the dogs grew deeper. She began telling her parents that she wanted to become a veterinarian one day, so she could help animals the way the dogs had helped her. Whenever she said it, her parents exchanged hopeful glances. They knew this was more than just a passing thought. The dogs had changed her heart forever. Soon the family began training the dogs with the help of a local trainer who had heard about the story. The trainer was amazed at how quickly they learned commands. especially considering they had been strays all their lives. "They're smart," he said with admiration. "But more than that, they're deeply connected to her. They'll do anything she asks." The girl laughed joyfully as she taught them to sit, stay, and fetch, her small voice filled with confidence. The younger shepherd loved the games, bouncing happily around her, while the older one listened calmly, proud to obey. Months passed, and the dogs became a natural part of the family. They went on walks together in the evenings where passers-by often stopped to greet them. The girl held the leash proudly, her head held high, no longer the shy child she once was. The older shepherd walked with dignity, while the younger one sometimes pulled playfully, making the girl giggle. People often said the sight of the three together was the most beautiful reminder of hope and courage. The story of the guardian dogs spread far beyond their small town. A local newspaper wrote an article that was later picked up by national media. Soon, animal lovers across the country were sending letters, toys, and food for the dogs. Some even wrote that the story had inspired them to adopt strays instead of buying pets. The family kept a small box of the letters, and the girl often read them aloud, her face glowing with happiness. But for the family, the greatest gift wasn't the attention or the letters. It was the way the two dogs had filled their home with love. The parents often sat together at night, watching their daughter sleep peacefully with one shepherd curled at her feet and the other lying at the door. It was a sight that made them whisper, "Thank God they found her." One evening, as the sun set and the sky turned pink, the girl sat on the porch with the two dogs beside her. She stroked their fur and whispered softly, "I'll never forget that night. You didn't know me, but you still came. You stayed. You saved me. I'll always take care of you now. You're my family forever." The dogs didn't understand her words, but they understood her heart. The younger one licked her cheek, while the older one rested its head gently on her lap. The family's neighbors often marveled at how fate had brought them together. "Imagine," one said, "those strays could have walked the other way that night. But they didn't. They listened to her cries when nobody else did. Maybe that's destiny," another added, "or maybe that's what love looks like when it's pure." In the end, the two stray German shepherds found more than just a little girl in need. They found their own second chance. No longer unwanted or hungry, they became beloved members of a family. They became symbols of courage for a town and a reminder that sometimes the most powerful acts of kindness come from the most unexpected places. As time went on, the girl grew stronger, her confidence shining brighter each day. She still told the story often, never leaving out a single detail. And every time she told it, she ended with the same words, "They saved me when I thought I was all alone. I'll never let them go." The dogs continued to guard her, not because anyone asked them to, but because they had chosen her as their own. They had once been strays with no direction, but now they had a purpose, a family to protect, and a little girl who believed in them completely. And so, their story wasn't just about a rescue. It was about love found in the unlikeliest of places, about two forgotten creatures who became heroes, and about a little girl who discovered that sometimes angels don't have wings, they have paws and wagging tails.